Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of professional wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm great this morning, Conrad. Couldn't be better. Happy to see you. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Interesting show today, to say the least. One of the most provocative and interesting characters in my tenure. We're going to talk about Goldust, and that broke a lot of molds when he was being evolved and developing.
Well, I'm excited to talk about Goldust, but before we do, we got to talk about what's going on this weekend. Forbidden Door is here, and anytime AEW has a pay-per-view, they always over-deliver. I'm sure this will be no exception. It's a joint show between All Elite Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and of course, they couldn't do it without the voice of wrestling. So be sure to check out JR this weekend. It's this Sunday night, live on pay-per-view. I'll be watching on Triller. You can get it anywhere you enjoy pay-per-views, but man, what a loaded card. These crossover pay-per-views, you're not really new to those. I mean, WCW was doing these, gosh, like 35 years ago or something crazy, but this whole Forbidden Door concept, boy, it has grown and grown and grown. And it seems to be a great relationship between AEW and New Japan. You mentioned last week what a sleeper matchup it was going to be with Naito and Moxley over the weekend. I'm sure you saw that Moxley and your old pal, man, they just absolutely tore it down. The War Master, the Beast Master, Josh Barnett and Moxley in a bloody battle for Bloodsport over in Japan. How fired up are you for this weekend, Forbidden Door, Jim?
I'm very excited, Connie. I think it's going to be fun. Card has got a lot of potential surprises to it, and as you mentioned, the kids that work for AEW always seem to over deliver on these pay-per-views. At least that's my assessment of it. And I'm excited about to see how these matches go and who actually steals the show.
It's going to be one heck of a pay-per-view. Hope that you'll make plans to join us. I'm going to be watching live on pay-per-view. JR is going to be there, of course. It's Forbidden Door, and it's going down this Sunday. There's still a chance to pick up some tickets, too. AEWTIX.com. Jim, you don't run a lot of shows in the New York area. I mean, that's the old WWF stomping grounds, but there's been a couple of big shows up there for AEW. Of course, the Arthur Ashe experiments, and then last year to close the show at World's End with MJF and the Devil and all that stuff. But I mean, we're back. I mean, wrestling in the Northeast, that's got to be like wearing an old pair of slippers for you, man. It's just comfortable. It just goes together now, huh?
Yeah, I lived there for, a long time, lived in Connecticut, and kind of enjoyed it, by the way. You find your places to eat and these little diners and things like that I like. So yeah, it's going to be good. I'm excited about the matchups. A lot of things I'm looking forward to. So I don't know what I'm going to call yet, but it doesn't matter to me. As I said many times, whatever Tony Khan wants me to do is what I'll do. And it's not a conundrum. It's not a problem, because I'm going to be doing the same things that I've done forever, and going to try to do them at the highest level possible.
I'm excited to see the pay-per-view. Hope that you guys will make plans to check it out as well. Support JR. And by the way, when we're talking about supporting JR, we should also mention that you've got some appearances coming up, including not this weekend, but next weekend. You're going to be in the former ECW arena, Battleground Championship Wrestling, the Barbecue Bash meet and greet. It's going down on July 6th at the 2300 Arena in Philadelphia. Battleground Championship Wrestling is your hookup. You'll be back in Ohio on August 2nd. And then WrestleCade. Here comes JR. Man, Winston-Salem, it's become a tradition. You got a lot of fun things in the hopper right now. And I think we should at least mention that every time I log into social media, I see somebody else quoting something from your book, bragging about your book. You've done the audiobook version now. You can get it digitally, of course, as well. But my favorite, and I think what most folks would prefer, is an autographed copy of that book. And it's available now at jrsbbq.com. And you're not just signing books. You've got autographed figures. You've got trading cards. But the book, man, an autographed book from JR, that's going to have real value. Short-term, long-term. And I highly recommend it. And while you're there, as a friend of mine likes to say, it costs nothing to look. Pick up some of that all-purpose seasoning. Try the red ass hot sauce. What about the Chipotle ketchup? What about the main event mustard? 2 types of barbecue sauce. Something for everybody at jrsbbq.com. Isn't that right, Jim?
Yeah, that's what we think. But we're very biased. I will be transparent in saying that. But yeah, it's business has been really good, and we're up to date on our shipping. Stephen Link's done a good job of staying ahead of the curve, and so we're just rocking along, man, and glad of it, and grateful for the business.
Check it out if you haven't already, jrsbbq.com. And man, this is grilling season. We say that all the time because JR and I even like to grill in the winter, but every single weekend I'm hearing from somebody, hey man, you barbecuing this weekend? Hey man, what do you got on the grill this weekend? Well, don't get caught without JR sauce. jrsbbq.com is your hookup. And speaking of hooking up, we're going to hook up where we left off because we talked about Goldust and Dustin Rhodes just a couple of weeks ago. And we're going to pick up where we left off that conversation. It was after WrestleMania 12. What a big moment that was. Goldust and Roddy Piper. It finally happened. No, it wasn't the original plan, but what we got, I think you could argue, was perhaps even better. And what's interesting is what's in the cards for Goldust next. We would see on the April 8th edition of Monday Night Raw, Vince McMahon doing an in-ring interview with the Ultimate Warrior when all of a sudden Goldust comes out. And when Goldust gets in the ring, Vince is going to announce that Goldust is going to be facing the Ultimate Warrior at the next In Your House. And this is a feud that I can't say that I would have necessarily seen on my bingo card. But what'd you think of this pairing, Jim Hellwig and Dustin Runnels here?
Well, it was a marquee type booking. You know, it was 2 guys that we wanted people to pay attention to. And of course, it was booked to get the Warrior over. And Goldust suffered through that presentation and did a good job. So I didn't have a problem with that booking. You know why it's there? It's there to hopefully, through the course of the contest and the presentation, that you get your star. Now, both of them both are stars. I get that. But Warrior has just come back in and we wanted to make an impression. And so that's the slide for that match, the graphic for that match. There you see Marlena. She was an integral part of that whole presentation, quite frankly. Added something different and sex appeal and provocativeness. So it was good. They were a good combination. They were a good pairing.
I wanted to ask you about some of the criticism that you started to receive, because even this same week, where, you know, we're finishing up WrestleMania, we're starting this feud with the Ultimate Warrior. The Connecticut Post, which would be the local paper there, has a front page article about Goldust, and they've got some quotes from the Fairfield County gay community. And they're saying, particularly when gay men are being beaten and even murdered in real life, they have this man dressed in drag showing he's less than a man coming on to other men who then beat him up. The gist is, of course, they're speaking with some therapists in New York who say, hey, this is sending the wrong message to children. These kids view wrestling stars as heroes. This reinforces a number of different inaccurate stereotypes about gay men. And he goes on, but, and to be clear, this isn't quite yet the Attitude Era. I mean, there's a lot of programming and commercials based around the audience being largely more youthful. I mean, they're trying to skew younger. I mean, it's aimed to be a children's product at times. What was Vince's reaction to this criticism?
He loved it. He loved it. He was of the belief that any publicity is good publicity. They spelled Goldust right, and it got a lot of publicity for the company that hopefully would create a question. The curiosity was a big element in this presentation. So, but he had no problem with it because, you know, it is what it is. Just, I don't know if people pay attention to those little surveys and stuff as much as they think they do. But in any event, I don't recall him having any issues with it at all.
It's interesting to think about the timing of how all this happens. I mean, it feels like Goldust is at a fever pitch and he's hotter than he's ever been as a character. And there's more of an emphasis on, his programs. I mean, goodness gracious, he just worked Roddy Piper at WrestleMania. Now he's programmed with the Warrior. Those are tippy top guys, no doubt about it. And then disaster strikes. On April 13th in Germany, he's working a match against Razor Ramon, right on Razor's last European tour for the WWE. And he tears his MCL. And they're going to rush him to Birmingham to meet with Dr. James Andrews. And that's where they realize, hey, this can't be fixed through arthroscopic surgery. And you're going to have to, do a lot of rehab. And that means you're going to be out of action for months. So it's written in the Observer that he won't be 100%, but he's still going to baby the knee and try to get through the pay-per-view. And I know that injuries are just part of it. But you really hate to see a guy seemingly getting his first big break.
All right.
And now this happens. Are you at this time? I don't think you're technically running talent relations, but I know you're still office. Are you in communication with him about the injury?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I communicated with him on almost a daily basis. So I don't know where we were on my transformation into the head of talent relations. You'd know more about that than I, but I think it worked out well because he got back in action. That's just the old school in Dustin. It's like I can almost hear Dusty saying to him, "Just got your break. Can you work with this injury? If the answer is yes, then get your ass out there and take advantage of your opportunity that's being presented to you." So it was bad timing, obviously, but those things you just can't plan for.
You can't plan for them. So we try to march through and do the show anyway. And it is a fun show. It's In Your House number 7. It's known as Good Friends, Better Enemies. It went down on April 28th in Omaha, Nebraska. It's a sellout, over 9,000 fans in attendance. Over 8,000 of them paid a gate of nearly 121,000. That doesn't sound like a ton of money by 2024 standards, but at the time it was the largest gate in the history of Omaha. And right smack dab in the middle of the card, there's Goldust defending the Intercontinental Championship against the Ultimate Warrior. Now he's working with his knee heavily bandaged, and they're trying to cover this on the pregame show. They have a Warrior interview, which ends with Goldust blowing dust in his eyes. And Doc Hendricks said Goldust tried to run from the Warrior, slipped, and injured his knee. Still, we wind up working 7 minutes and 47 seconds here. Warrior is going to beat Goldust by count out. Goldust has a new bodyguard with him here, the former Mantar. And Meltzer would say, this was horrible. Warrior grabbed Marlena's cigar and began smoking it, sat in her chair, put on Goldust's wig. And Goldust mainly complained that he was barely in the ring. And it would have been okay for 2 minutes, but it just never ended. Right. Finally, Warrior burned Goldust's hand with a cigar, clotheslined him out of the chair, which was the first body contact of the entire match. And Goldust walked out for the count out. Not only a worst match of the year candidate, but a worst match of the decade candidate, 3.5 stars.
Wow.
Now, of course, in reality, if Goldust couldn't do anything, if Dustin couldn't really work, you probably should have just canceled the match. But Vince probably didn't want to give up that pay-per-view revenue. He still had high hopes the Warrior was going to be a big draw, right?
Oh, yeah. We had great expectations that magic could be reproduced. Reverting back to the old days or the heyday of the Warrior. But, there could have been things done in the ring, an interview segment, or just admit that he's hurt and that he's can't be cleared, whatever. There's a million ways to get around that. That's a non-issue to me. But they still tried to have the match. The old show must go on. And sometimes that's not the right decision. In this case, it wasn't the right decision because I don't know we did either guy any good by how that match was presented.
You're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, because on the one hand, you probably don't want to put the Intercontinental title on the Ultimate Warrior. You want to position him as one of your top guys. And well, the Intercontinental title is the number 2 belt, and we're still new in this relationship. How long is this going to last? And we know, with the benefit of hindsight, not much longer. But
Yeah.
but at the same time, you don't want to squash Goldust. You don't want to do what you would normally do and say, well, he's
It's-
hurt and going to be out, so let's take the belt and put it on this guy. But if you're
yeah.
not sold that he's going to be around, this is just an awful spot. But it is the number 2 match on the pay-per-view for the number 2 belt. And boy, the newsletter guys, they were not happy with this decision. Do you remember receiving much criticism about it, or was it just another day at
Oh,
the
yeah.
office?
No, it was, there was a lot of criticism about it. A lot of people complaining of the match quality. I find that perplexing because what it tells me is that the fans just didn't really know how badly Goldust was injured, and the fact that he needed surgery to repair his ailment. So it was you're right, Connie. It was damned if you do and damned if you don't. And in hindsight, which is always pretty close to 2020, we could have done something else that wouldn't have put the burden on the in-ring performance. One clothesline out of the chair was the max, quite frankly.
Let's talk about what's next. On May 6th, we would see The Undertaker pin Owen Hart on a Monday Night Raw match. And during the match, Goldust is at ringside doing color. He's going to get up and start fondling Paul Bearer, who runs away. And at one point, when Owen was thrown out of the ring, Goldust starts fondling him as well, and Owen freaks out. Bearer brings out a casket, and boy, Goldust runs away. Then we would see Vince interview The Undertaker and Paul Bearer, who come out with a casket with Goldust's name on it for their casket match they're setting up at the pay-per-view. And when Goldust comes out a second time, the whole place explodes with a chant that you shouldn't have done in 1996 and you definitely can't do in 2024. Goodness gracious. And Goldust starts pawing at The Undertaker. Undertaker's going to stop him. They do a stare down, and Mankind attacks Undertaker and does the mandible claw. With Taker out, Goldust gets on top of him, starts making out with him, starts licking his leg. The idea is that he's teasing some, well, you know. And Goldust starts rubbing his own crotch here before moving in for the kill. Undertaker sits up and Goldust gets out of there. I mean, listen, it is a heck of a thing to go from Roddy Piper to the Ultimate Warrior to the Undertaker. But did you think they went too far here with the fondling and the passing out and the licking the leg and all this stuff?
Oh, I think so. But we're again in new territory. This is a brand new persona. It's very controversial to start with, and then Dustin goes into business for himself, and just as a showman will do, ad-libbed a lot of the proceedings. So you're like I said, damned if you do and damned if you don't. We are in uncharted water. There had never been a character, except maybe Gorgeous George back in the day, that elicited the kind of emotion that we were shooting for with Goldust.
How do you remember the real life Mark Calloway being with this creative? I mean, Bruce has sort of joked before that over the years, you guys gave him some really stinky creative. This is a risk. This feels like a gamble. I mean, we know that the real life Scott Hall was not really into this presentation. Right. Do you know what the real life Undertaker thought about all this?
If he had any thoughts, he kept them to himself or to his small group of friends. Taker's such a team player. He may have looked at it as a challenge that I can get a good match out of Dustin. And there's a lot of old school feelings there as well. You know, Taker grew up kind of, I don't want to say idolizing Dusty, but certainly had great respect for Dusty and had a respect to the family. Because you got to remember, Dusty was still alive at that time. So I think there's a lot of different elements that contributed to that situation. But Taker was the kind of guy that was he was just an old gunslinger, and he believed that you guys met in the middle of the street in front of the saloon. He's going to draw faster than you and shoot you. So I never heard him say, to me anyway, that he detested the booking. That was not his case. He's a pro. Taker was a pro, and he believed that he could have a good match with any other top guy. And certainly, finally, after all the years paying his dues, Dustin was a top guy.
On the go home episode of Monday Night Raw, as we get ready for the next pay-per-view, which is a casket match with Goldust and the Undertaker, you're going to be interviewing Paul Bearer, who's got a casket here, and he says that the Undertaker's in it. Mankind comes out, tries to do something to the casket. Goldust is trying to make out with Paul Bearer, and now we're set. And what happens is even crazier than the knee injury and the match we had with the Ultimate Warrior. We're in Florence, South Carolina for In Your House, Beware of Dog.
A mecca of pro wrestling, Conrad. Great state of Alabama in Florence.
Oh, South Carolina, Florence, South Carolina.
I'm sorry. All right, it's early.
Either way, though, this is the show where the power goes out.
Yeah, I remember.
You're right smack dab in the middle of a pay-per-view. There's some crazy storms happening. We lose power. It's live, and now there's no lights in the building. So they have to redo the match. Now, this first match in the dark goes 8 minutes, and we've got Vader and Bradshaw and Helmsley and Isaac Yankem and Austin all doing a run in to try to help put the Undertaker in a casket. But now, after it's all over with, Vince realizes we got to do make goods. So we redo the pay-per-view. So the first match happens on a Sunday. We have a Monday Night Raw, and then we have a Tuesday. We're just going to do over of the exact show that you were here to see 2 nights ago. This time, the Goldust beats the Undertaker in 12 minutes and 36 seconds. And this is a big deal. Like, it's one thing to work with Roddy Piper. Now you're working with Warrior, but you just beat the Undertaker in a casket match.
We're pushing a guy, trying to get him over, for God's sakes. How else do you do it?
That's a great question, because when you go on a winning streak like Roman Reigns or like Goldust here, great stuff happens. When he finally locks Undertaker in the casket, a bunch of smoke comes out of the casket. And when it's finally opened, the Undertaker wasn't in the casket. So, of course, we did a little magic here.
Yeah. Look at Rene Goulet's hair. God damn, it's something.
Little Dutch boy haircut.
Yeah, man. That good old Timmy White there at ringside. Paul Bearer, bed hair. All good.
So let's talk about what Dustin thought about all this. He says that this was one of the highlights for him. To this day, I'm one of the only guys who ever beat the Undertaker in a casket match. I had Mankind's help that night. We were doing this routine where Mankind was my son and I was his mommy, sick, no question about it. We built up the casket match, and Bruce Pritchard wanted to play a joke on Undertaker. The idea was that when I had Undertaker down before he sat up, I would crawl between his legs and grab his crotch. It was all in good fun. But around this time, I was becoming more and more addicted to Vicodin. The pills helped with my stamina, and the more I took, the more real pain I felt in my body, which was backwards. Slowly, the addiction started taking over, although I wasn't conscious of what was happening. Subtle injuries or aches and pains that I ignore now led me to take more and more pills. I started drinking more to enhance the effect and cover the pain. I was getting louder in the bars, doing stupid things. Your head can get a little crazy when you suddenly have money and a little bit of power. In my mind, that's all I was doing, no big deal. But looking back, I can see how it was becoming a problem. And this is something that unfortunately we've heard a lot in wrestling. But I got to think that without him trying to work through that knee injury, maybe we wouldn't have been on this slippery slope that we find ourselves now. And I know that for so long, the old guard in wrestling has been, oh man, don't tell anybody if you're hurt, work through it. You don't want to lose your spot, rub some dirt on it. Yeah. But that does lead to the temptation and sometimes necessity of turning to prescription pills, right?
I don't think it made any difference. I think Dustin was doomed to get hooked on Vicodin. It was very readily available. It seemed to work for a lot of guys. So I think the inevitable happened. It was bound to happen. In other words, I think Dustin's road down that trail, it was going to happen one way or the other. That's just his personality at that time. He couldn't say no to the drug abuse, and it damn near got him fired.
Well, I'm glad that didn't happen. Let's talk about what happens on Monday Night Raw. The very night in between is when we have, so again, We had the pay-per-view on Sunday. We got to do a do-over on Tuesday, but there's a Monday in between. And even though we're still doing that pay-per-view over, we're already building for the next pay-per-view. So that's where we would see Goldust wrestle the Ultimate Warrior in a King of the Ring tournament qualifying match. It goes to a double count out, eliminating both men. And later in the show, Ahmed Johnson would suffer his first pinfall loss to Vader because Owen jumped off the top rope and hit Ahmed with his cast, knocking him out cold. He's going to do a stretcher job to the back. And while he's unconscious, Ahmed is who we're talking about here. He's on the stretcher, and Goldust gives him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. When Ahmed comes to and sees the Goldust on his mouth, he goes crazy. And he's going to just run through the entire backstage. This was a fantastic angle. I mean, I remember watching this at the time, and his rampage backstage felt believable. This is an era where we're not seeing a lot of backstage stuff like this. So it really stood out. What'd you think of this angle and the pairing of Goldust and Ahmed Johnson?
Well, it was very controversial, obviously. It got people talking, got you talking, got me talking. I had to talk about it because it's my job. But it was, again, new territory, new water. How deep is this water? We're not going to know until we get out there, get about waist deep or chest deep, just how it was. So, and some people still don't like the Goldust character. I liked it then. I like it now because it got people talking. And that's what you always try to achieve in that regard, in this particular area of the business. So it was, like I said, every day was a new day with Goldust because there was no precedent as to, well, we did this to so-and-so, this will work for him. Nobody was around when Gorgeous George was throwing out the flowers and had his hair all, bleached and all this other stuff. So every day was an adventure. Every day was a new day. And then of course when the staff, Bruce and Patterson and all those guys saw that they had some opportunity to kind of ad lib creatively, it made it even worse because then everybody had feedback. Everybody wanted to contribute to the angle, and it was tough. It was tough. None of us knew what was going to work and what wasn't, but we just knew that the bolder we got, the crazier things seemed to be.
And again, what confidence Vince and the WWF had in Goldust. I mean, Again, to recap, we go Roddy Piper, Ultimate Warrior, Undertaker, and now Ahmed Johnson. And most people felt Ahmed Johnson was in line to be the next big babyface, arguably the number 2 or number 3 babyface maybe at the time behind Shawn and perhaps the Undertaker. So they're in a collision course now. It's going to be Ahmed Johnson and Goldust for the Intercontinental title at King of the Ring 1996. We did a full episode on this in the archives that you should check out if you want to hear more about King of the Ring 96. What an important show that was. It's the show where Austin 316 was born, but it's also the show where Ahmed Johnson beat Goldust to win the Intercontinental Championship. Believe it or not, they went like 15 minutes, even with Dustin working hurt. After a sleeper, Goldust is going to kiss Ahmed, which seems to give him superpowers. He wakes up, he hits Goldust with the Pearl River Plunge, and he wins the Intercontinental title. I guess it makes sense if we're trying to protect Goldust and give him a chance to heal up. We needed him to drop the belt to somebody. Right. Ahmed Johnson is seemingly moving up on that babyface side of the aisle. What did you think of the decision to take the belt off of Goldust and put it on Ahmed Johnson?
Well, we kind of had to take it off Goldust. Whether we should have put it on Ahmed Johnson or not is arguable, debatable. That didn't work out long term, so apparently it wasn't a great idea. And Ahmed was just very green. He had $1 million body and he had a look that you couldn't replicate by taking some guy out of the gym or off the street. He was very unique in that regard, but he had some issues. He had very little self-confidence. He was very untrusting. So, and that's because the boys in the locker room worked him. He was manipulated. And he thought guys were trying to help him, and they weren't. They were trying to screw him around.
Let's talk a little bit about the way Dustin felt after he lost to Ahmed Johnson. He wrote that things were changing. I could feel it. Vince was getting a lot of criticism from different groups. Parents were calling headquarters and complaining about Goldust. Some of them didn't want their kids watching if Goldust was performing. An article in the New York Times came out saying gay rights activists were upset over the character. The ratings were good, and as far as I was concerned, it wasn't my problem. I was having fun doing my job. I couldn't see the larger picture, and I'm not even sure how much I cared to see it. Needless to say, my insecurity started to rise towards the surface. There were a couple of times when Vince told me not to do something, and I did it anyway. Don't rub up on anyone in the ring tonight, he said before one match. I did it anyway.
I remember that, Conrad.
Tell us about that.
That was a specific mandate from the head honcho. You know, there's just things that we did that were not received at all very well. Not received at all in a very positive way. Not entertaining, not funny. Just jaw dropping controversy. So, but we had to start taking things away from Goldust that would apply to his presentation, and that included rubbing against somebody, as you described, and that's the way it was. And so it was. It would see something and say, "Oh, we can't do that again." Then we'd change it. And so, because the character itself was controversial enough without adding extra, it's just going to be that way. I mean, he was what he was. He was open for suggestion, open for conversation, and so it was just a interesting time. And like I said, every night something would come out of the menu, something would be eliminated. Illustration being the rubbing against people scenario.
We want to make sure that we quote Dustin here. When Vince told him, don't rub anybody in the ring tonight, and he does it anyway, he says that Vince was furious. He told me he'd fire me right there on the spot if I ever did something like that again. I apologize, but I still slipped up a couple more times. In a way, I think I knew it was all coming to an end. The roller coaster was gathering speed on the way down, and I was having a hard time hanging on. Man, to read his words right there, like from the outside looking in, it feels like, hey man, you're not losing any ground. You're hurt. They're taking the belt off of you to, it's part of a story and to give you
paranoia,
a chance to
Conrad. All about the money.
Yes.
All about the money. He saw money that may not be there for an extended length of time. You got to remember that it is his payoff for WrestleMania with Piper was by far the biggest pay-per-view payoff that he ever got, and maybe even to this day. So he had that old wrestler. Well, this is going to end. I can't do anything about it. I'm stressing out. I'm insecure, and so here we are. His insecurity was going to be whether he was a Goldust or something else. That's just his nature. That was just his way of dealing with things, and a lot of it was contributed by the drug use. Paranoia runs deep in your heart. It will seep. Starts when you're always afraid. Come out of line, man, take you away. Some song would say, or something along those lines. Anyhow, it was that was just his nature. That was just his nature, raised in a wrestling family where you're always thinking about the worst case scenario. Not the glass there then would be half full or half empty as opposed to being half full.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're half full of Manscaped. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure to announce that Smooth Sack Summer is officially upon us. And when you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off and free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use our code Jim Ross. Summertime and the trimming's easy. Just before we clicked record, JR was telling me that he's back in Florida and he's going to make sure that he manscapes today. He doesn't want to make sure that, all of his walk-ons down there don't get exactly what they're hoping for. They're going to get more than they bargained for with old JR today because he's got the Performance 5.0 Ultra. It's everything he needs to prepare for his summer bod. And every guy knows how scary it can get when you're going for a close shave below the belt. And that's why we trust Manscaped for all of our sensitive areas. Inside the package, you'll find the real star of the show, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It's a 5th generation trimmer that Manscaped has improved each and every time. And now it's got 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads. You got a standard one to take a little off the top, but a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. It's also got dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones. They've even got 3 length setting combs. And did I mention it's waterproof too? Yeah, later today, JR is going to trim up his asshole at the beach. You can do it at the lake or in the shower. Now that you've got the perfect haircut, the liquid formulations can keep that freshness going. We're talking about the Crop Soother, which is the aftershave lotion, or the Crop Preserver, the anti-chafe ball deodorant. Once they touch your sack, you'll never go back. They even got 2 free gifts here, Manscaped Boxers and the Shed Travel Bag. JR loves the travel bag and uses it to this day. Everything you're looking for, including the wet products, manscaped.com can help you with, including the new Buff Bundle. They've got the silicone scrubber and the body wash, so you can finally ditch that nasty-ass loofah. Grab some freshness. Why not get 20% off and free shipping when you use our code Jim Ross at manscaped.com? That's 20% off and free shipping with the code Jim Ross at manscaped.com. It's smooth sack summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind.
Yeah, great product, great sponsor, and certainly worth checking out. Great gift item, by the way. Just as you saw there, it's a great gift item with all those different apparatus. There's great products, and they've been with us since almost day one, maybe since day one. I'm not sure.
Yeah, since day one, man. And they always deliver. I love that you called it a great gift because I've given this as a gift several times. And usually people think it's a gag gift because it gets a reaction. It's kind of fun to think about what it is. And when you open it up and you don't know, they think it's socks or a tie or something. Wait, it's a ball hair trimmer. And then I hear from them a week later and they're like, hey man, I know that was supposed to be funny and it was. That thing's for real deal. That's a real good product. It is. Go try it right now. Use the promo code Jim Ross. Get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com.
Great deal. Great deal. Check it out.
Let's talk about what's next for Goldust. Unfortunately, the Village Voice, which is a big paper in the New York area, comes out on July 9th. And they're just ripping the WWF and Goldust, saying that this character has brought homophobia to new levels in the WWF. And that happens just a couple of weeks before In Your House #9, International Incident. Goes down July 21st in Vancouver. There's nearly 15,000 fans there. Got to be the biggest ever for an In Your House event. And The Undertaker is working with Goldust. So once again, he's working with a tippy top guy. They're going to be stalling for about 3 minutes and 15 seconds. Then Undertaker's going to chokeslam Goldust on the stairs and pick up the stairs, but Marlena's going to protect Goldust. So Undertaker drops the steps and dominates the next several minutes. Goldust eventually undoes the top turnbuckle padding, whips the Undertaker into the exposed metal on his back. Then he's going to drop the stairs on his back and go for a camel clutch. Taker makes a comeback, hits the tombstone, and as he's going for the pin, here comes Mankind from under the ring, who puts the mandible claw on the Undertaker. That gets the DQ. Hey man, it's a big time pay-per-view anytime you're working with the Undertaker. But it does feel like now Goldust is kind of in the background and we're transitioning into this Mankind Undertaker feud, which we know is great for Mankind. And we know they're going to do great stuff, but I could see how Dustin started to feel like, hey, I'm in the background now.
I'm getting passed over.
Yeah.
I'm losing my spot, as the great Arn Anderson once said. So, that's where that was. And again, when you're raised in a household of paranoia, shall we say, and a lot of old school wrestlers can understand this statement. you lose your spot. You think you're losing your spot. It's not a healthy environment. It's not a good mentally. And that's where Dustin was, smack dab in the middle of controversy and worried about his spot.
We should mention that on the house shows, Goldust is working against Shawn Michaels in the main event, including a big one at a stadium show in Toronto on August 24th. Goldust would also earn a title shot on Raw Championship Friday in September after winning a mini battle royal. So he's not falling all the way off the cards. He doesn't really have a program of substance after this. But that takes us to SummerSlam 96. And we've covered this one in the archives. It's available for you now at grillingjr.com. It went down in Cleveland, Ohio. How crazy is it that all these years later, SummerSlam is back in Cleveland? On the show, we would see Goldust beat Mark Mero, and he beats him with the curtain call. And Meltzer gives it 2 stars. And I got to ask, was the initial plan, do you think the plan all along was to do some sort of Marlena Sable stuff here? Because I know that, Mark Mero had just come in around WrestleMania that year. So for him to lose on pay-per-view, here's 2 guys they're really trying to get behind. Goldust, who's been on top. They're trying to push Mark Mero. He just recently lost, in the finals or along the way to Steve Austin. Do you think the original plan was some more Sable Marlena stuff when Marlena started to show interest in Sable?
I think it was intriguing and interesting, without a doubt. You got 2 very hot characters. Let's not forget how big a star Sable become almost overnight.
Yes.
She became a huge star, seemingly at the blink of an eye. You go to bed, you wake up, and there's Sable with a spotlight on her. So I think it was a convenience having 2 sexy women that we could book, and they didn't have to do much in the ring, because I think fans realized that neither one of them were trained workers, but they were both attractions. And I've talked about the difference in a on top person and an attraction. Andre was an attraction back in the day because you only saw him a few times a year, and it just worked out that way. It worked out the best that way. Same thing with we could keep from overexposing Sable and Terry very easily in that respect, and they brought something to the table. They had all this great sex appeal. Both of them looked like $1 million, and we had a male 18 to 34-year-old audience primarily. That was our focus, and most of those male 18 to 34-year-olds liked the female aspect of this proposition. So, but I don't think it started out that way, but it certainly had its merits as we went along.
Let's mention that the next night on Raw in Wheeling, West Virginia, Goldust is going to win a number 1 contender 4-man battle royal. It's got Steve Austin, Savio Vega, and Sid. Goldust winds up eliminating Sid and Vega to win. And that sets up a title shot in a ladder match at a stadium in Toronto. It's Exhibition Stadium in Toronto. Shawn Michaels versus Goldust. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's 10 years to the day after the WWF ran the big event there. At the time, Hulk Hogan was the top star, not only in the WWF, but in all of wrestling, and he was defending the WWF World title against Paul Orndorff. That event set a record, 69,300 folks there. And we mentioned last week or a few weeks ago on the Edge show that, believe it or not, Edge was actually at that show. Now, fast forward 10 years, and Hulk Hogan's on the other channel. Shawn Michaels is our top guy, and his challenger isn't Paul Orndorff, who's actually working backstage in WCW. It's Goldust. They call this show WWF Express, and they've got 21,211 fans paying 436,000 Canadian dollars, which is about $182 American, but still. There's another 4,000 fans that attend a Special Olympics softball fundraiser over the weekend. We even see Psycho Sid win a tug of war with an elephant. What do you remember about this WWF Express show? 21,000 fans. That's got to be the biggest show of the year for y'all.
It was amazing because of so many people there. It exceeded I can't say it exceeded everybody's expectations. It certainly exceeded mine. And it drew real well. We were still learning how to do out of ring events. So it was all during this growth period and trying things and seeing what works and what doesn't work and how do we manage this line and things of that nature. It was a great success. Toronto's an amazing market for wrestling, has been forever, and you find that a lot, Conrad, when you go back to a hub meaning a territory like Minneapolis was a hub, Tulsa was a hub, the Garden was a hub, obviously. So it was just a unique opportunity to take advantage of what seemed to be hot. And Toronto was hot, and the people bought tickets, and that was always the goal.
21,211 fans, and Goldust is in the main event. My goodness.
I guess he's over, huh?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. That wrestler paranoia you touched on earlier, he's acting like, when he wrote his book, that he felt, and we can't argue with how he felt, that it was slipping away and that
Right.
it was on a downhill slope. I mean, this is the biggest show of the year. It's a freaking stadium show, and you're in the main event. Like, man, you're not slipping. You've got a great thing going.
Yeah, but it's hard to be realistic with somebody that is unrealistic.
Yes.
It's hard to be realistic about something that is so personal to the individual. And it's daunting, to say the least. But you got to go back to Goldust's original personality. He was paranoid and worried about his spot from day one. And he knew that, like any other controversial gimmick, that it was just a matter of time before the heat and the flame started lessening. And when the talents sense that, they get all kinds of feels.
Let's talk a little bit about September 6th. WWF is going to hold Raw Championship Friday, and because he won a number one contender battle royal, Goldust gets a world title shot at Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels is going to win the match in nearly 12 minutes, and afterwards, Mankind attacks him to further their upcoming world title match at In Your House Mind Games. I find it interesting that Goldust is the guy who's working the stadium show against Shawn. Goldust is working most of the house shows against Shawn. He's even doing the live match on Raw here. But when it comes to the pay-per-view, we're not going with Goldust and Shawn. Why do you think that was? Vince didn't have confidence in him on pay-per-view?
Well, obviously, I think that's kind of goes without saying. Yeah, I'd say so. Just, it wasn't the fact that, was he reliable? We knew he was reliable from the standpoint that he worked hurt and was a soldier, and went through a lot of pain, a lot of sacrifice physically, and we saw that and we appreciated that. But that's the same mark of a guy that's trying to get as much juice out of the fruit as he could. Squeeze it as hard as you can, and let all those let that juice drip right on out and get you some. But I think that it was a personality trait of most wrestlers, and for some second and third generation wrestlers, it's always been a specific issue.
Let's talk a little bit about In Your House 10. That's what's next. It's in Philadelphia. It's Mind Games. It goes down September 22nd, 1996 in Philadelphia. There's like 15,000 fans in the building, nearly 12,000 of them paying almost 211,000 at the gate. But it's Goldust working with The Undertaker in a final curtain match. And the match can only end by pinfall, which it does, in 10 minutes and 23 seconds when The Undertaker pins Goldust with a tombstone. Man, these guys, these characters, The Undertaker and Goldust, they met time and time again on pay-per-view. What'd you think of those matches? What'd you think of their chemistry?
They had great chemistry, and they liked each other. And Dustin had great respect for Mark, The Undertaker, as he should, and he did. So that was a big boom for the build of the Goldust character, getting in the ring so many times with The Undertaker. Because when you're in the ring with The Undertaker, you've been made. You're a made man, and at that point. And they had so many opportunities to continue to improve on their match. it just worked. Again, the old school came to play. Dusty's kid, the controversy of that whole thing. We were trying to get closer to that Attitude Era time, and it was just it worked. It worked out because those guys respected each other, and Dustin listened to Taker. I'm not saying Dustin didn't have the ability to lay out a match. We see him do that all the time at AEW. He's a entirely different, changed man, all for the better. But he's good at laying stuff out. But at the same time, when you're good at laying things out, you can contribute in a trustworthy way. And I think that's kind of what we had. That's what that deal's about. It was just, Dustin and Taker had that chemistry. It worked out really well, and they always had solid matches. Were they 5 stars and all that shit? I don't know. That's all subjective anyway, isn't it?
Yep.
So, I liked their chemistry. I really did. But I like both guys. I'm kind of biased there. I was booking the matches.
Let's talk a little bit about how Goldust is being received at the live events. While he might be not victorious in his challenge for the Undertaker, boy, the fans, they're still pretty hot at this character, to the point where there'd be so much booing that Goldust would lean into it. He'd grab the mic and say something like, "If you don't shut your mouths right now, I'll come out there and stick my tongue down each and every one of your throats." And in New York, they go insane cursing him, and a lot of times cursing him in Spanish, which I think made him laugh. He does it again in Detroit, and this time they start throwing things in the ring. And he's waving his arms to the crowd like, "Hey, bring it on," which might not have been the right thing to do in Detroit because there's so much stuff flying in that he's getting pinged with quarters and junk, and he loves it. But Sean has to bail. I know that, this is something that we would see pretty regularly in this era on the WCW side of things. But when trash started to be thrown into the ring, I'm sure somebody raises their hand and says, "Hey, this is a liability." Talk to us about that.
Well, it was a liability. We had to try to muff it a little bit. We had to try to de-escalate the that kind of thing, because throwing shit at the ring it's not good. It's not good heat. It's not good nothing. It serves no purpose. It's just letting some fan get some attention. I just threw my cup of ice in the ring or whatever. So it was just it was not healthy. Obviously, you don't want it as a promoter. So we got to do what we can to de-escalate that kind of shit.
We would actually see Goldust do this bit again where he's threatening to make out with the audience at In Your House Buried Alive on October 20th, 1996. It's in Indianapolis, the largest wrestling crowd in the Indianapolis market since the 1992 WrestleMania. And speaking of Indianapolis, it's just come out this week, Jim, that Royal Rumble is headed to Indianapolis. And in the future, they're going to be getting a WrestleMania event. What do you think about Indianapolis as a big time market for pay-per-views?
One of my favorite restaurants in the world is there. Was it St. Elmo's?
Yeah, that's right.
You ever been there?
The cocktail sauce, man.
Whew. That's right. That's something to write home about. It'll open up your pores. It'll open up your sinuses without question.
Yes.
I like Indianapolis. I mean, look at the success they're having. Caitlin Clark's selling tickets for the WNBA team. I watched that on Sunday. Kind of got hooked in the game and watched the whole thing. And it was a 1-pointer, a good game. But I like basketball, and I got to be honest. I like women's basketball as much, if not more, than the men's game. Just pure to me. It's just more. It's not about me as much as it is about the team. And so that's my take on it. But Indianapolis is a good sports city, man. Look at all the events they've had.
We've got Mark Miro here in Indianapolis beating Goldust in 11 minutes and 38 seconds to retain the Intercontinental title. It gets 2 3/4 stars. The shooting star press, which he calls the wild thing, is the finish. And it does start to feel like, hey, this is not the same upward trajectory that Goldust has been on.
But we've said that for the last 10 minutes. That's not a new deal. It was just something that's there. It was obvious. And the more obvious it got, the more paranoid Dustin got.
That takes us to Survivor Series 96. This is the debut of The Rock. And we've covered this one before in the archives. I highly recommend you check it out, grillingjr.com. But it's a big show, and it's November 17th in Madison Square Garden. There's 18,647 fans there. It's the second largest gate of North America in 1996 with $529,000 there. The match is kind of hodgepodge. Goldust is going to be teaming with Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Crush, and Jerry Lawler. Take on the Stalker, which is Barry Windham, Jake Roberts, Mark Miro, and Rocky Maivia. It is what it is. November 19th, we've got a Superstars taping in Springfield where we would see Helmsley beat Goldust by count out. And that's their first match to get against each other ever. And we're going to actually start leaning towards Goldust in a babyface position because it's clear that Hunter Hearst Helmsley is a heel. What did you think about the idea of Goldust as a potential babyface? Could you see it?
Yeah, because the audience is telling us that they kind of like that. To me, it was just that the old market research, and the fans had booed him and would almost just turned him. Him meaning Goldust, pronoun boy. So yeah, I could feel it, I could see it, but I wasn't sure why. But quite frankly, it doesn't matter why. You got to go with the audience and their instincts and their feelings. And if you do, more often than not, you'll get it right.
It is interesting to think about after all the heat he's gotten. Hey, now we're going to try him as a babyface. So as I mentioned, November 19th, it's the first ever meeting between Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Goldust. The next day, it's the first meeting in the WWF between Steve Austin and Goldust. We know that Dustin and Austin wrestled a lot in WCW. But that gets us ready for the December 15th pay-per-view. It's yet another In Your House. It's In Your House. It's Time from West Palm Beach, Florida. It's a legitimate sellout, 5,708 fans there. And on the pay-per-view free-for-all, so it's like a pre-show to get you to pull the trigger and spend the $30 or whatever it is. You saw Helmsley flirting with Marlena. Goldust doesn't have a match on the pay-per-view, but he does wind up interfering in the Mark Miro Hunter Hearst Helmsley match when he grabs the belt and goes to hit Helmsley with it, but Helmsley ducks and he hits Mark Miro. So both of them are knocked out. Miro's going to win the match by count out. Helmsley's going to attack Goldust in the aisle. And after the pay-per-view goes off the air, Austin's going to beat Goldust when Helmsley interferes and costs him the match. Man, it's interesting to see that we didn't know it at the time, but he's working with what's going to become the biggest star in the business. And now they're trying to make him babyfaced against that guy. That's interesting to look back and think about, because I don't know that a lot of people would have put two and two together at the time and thought this new version of Stone Cold is going to be the top guy. He felt like a heel, not a babyface at the time. And Goldust felt like a heel, not a babyface. It's interesting to see how wrestling sometimes makes strange bedfellows.
It does, and you got to listen to the audience. That's your market research.
Yes.
It's real simple, really, really simple. Are they up? Are they cheering? Are they booing? What are the fans doing? And so let them decide. Let them decide. Don't book against the grain. And well, I'm going to go the exact opposite of what our paying customer wants. Why would you do that? What sense would that make? The booker didn't want to use his eraser. Come on. That's the most powerful weapon in all of wrestling, Conrad, by the way, the eraser.
Yes, sir.
So anyhow, yeah, just go with it. Go with what the audience is asking for as best you can.
We go with it on December 16th. The wheels are put in motion for a Goldust babyface turn. Marlena, with Mark Miro by her side, would beat Jerry Lawler with Hunter Hearst Helmsley by his side in the Karate Fighters Championship match. And you might be saying, what?
Shit.
Well, there was a product integration, and during commercials, as we were going in and out of the break, we would see pre-taped segments with characters from the WWF playing these Karate Fighters toys. Well, now they're going to do it during a segment on Raw in the ring.
Money talks, big boy.
Yes, it does. Lawler and Helmsley are then going to attack Miro. Goldust does a run in. He chases Helmsley away. Miro and Helmsley brawl to the back, leaving Goldust and Lawler in the ring. Lawler said he had no problem with Goldust, and he should be happy that a guy like Helmsley, who's rich and good looking, and the Intercontinental Champion, is after Marlena. And he asked Goldust if he was gay. He didn't use that word. And Goldust responded no and punched him. Helmsley comes out and tries to kidnap Marlena, but as he's leaving, Miro's in the aisle. Goldust runs out of the ring at full speed, and Helmsley throws Marlena onto Miro and gets out of the way. So Goldust charges and knocks into Miro, and that sends Marlena flying. Helmsley is going to beat up both Miro and Goldust as the show goes off the air. This is an interesting way to establish him as a babyface. How did you feel after all the questions about androgyny and the heat for the gay rights activists and things like that? Now we're just going to address it and have him say in a loud and clear voice, no, I'm not homosexual. What did you think of that?
I thought it took some courage. I thought we had to go back and, as my granny would say, lick our calf. That's what a cow does when the calf's born. They give it life. I thought all we're doing is licking our calf. And that was simple as I can put it. But I didn't have a problem with, again, the issue, Conrad, is that we're in an area today. You and I can book the shit out of that card. We can book the hell out of Goldust today. Back then, every day was a new day. And that was just the way that was. And we weren't sure what was going to work. How could you know what's going to work unless you worked in the territory with Gorgeous George, and nobody was alive that did that time. So, I just didn't ever, I never had an issue with that shit. I just thought that, I'm glad we went that direction. It took a little bit of the steam off of us. It made made Goldust a protagonist instead of an antagonist. And we tried to get into some personal issues and not build this whole foundation on homophobia, because that's what it was.
Let's talk about what's next. We've got the Raw tapings that happened on December 16th. We just mentioned, we're going to send Marlena flying and all that. Well, the following week, we would see Helmsley beat Miro to retain the title, and Goldust and Marlena are in the stands watching. Helmsley gets on the mic after the match and says Marlena's going to wind up with a real man. Goldust comes down after him, but Helmsley runs away. And before we close the year out, Mankind, Goldust, and The Undertaker all film a sports-related comedy show, part of a pilot for the people who did Second City TV. The idea, or the premise, is that we'll have 3 wrestlers who are sitting in their wrestling persona, sitting in a bar, discussing really highbrow subjects like philosophy. And that's hard for me to imagine The Undertaker doing. Do you remember this, and how much convincing did it take for Vince to allow The Undertaker to do something like that?
I knew it wouldn't take long for that idea to go by the wayside.
Yeah.
Taker was uncomfortable with it. It didn't make a lot of sense. If somebody looking to license another product through the WWF. But Taker was never, his character just didn't seem like it fit there. And he just, he went along with it, as he always did, as he always does, because he's a team player. But it wasn't a good idea for his character, especially. Undertaker's character always had to be booked in a unique way, using unique principles to keep your character of the Undertaker on solid ground. Because you got that, that element of lightning and this and that, mystique and macabre and all those cute little adjectives. So Uh, I, uh, I just never. Some of that shit just didn't work. Just didn't work. Some of it.
Let's talk about what did work, at least for me as a young fan. Shotgun Saturday Night. It happened on January 4th, 1997 at the Mirage nightclub in New York. And something crazy happens. We see Goldust beat the Sultan by count out. This is also, most famously perhaps, when Marlena jumped on the apron and pulled down her top. And the camera is shooting from behind. She's actually wearing pasties to cover herself, but we're at least giving the illusion that she's flashing the Sultan in order to gain the advantage for Goldust. What did you think about flashing in wrestling? Because this is really the first time we've seen something like this. I mean, way back when, maybe 10 years prior, we saw Miss Elizabeth reveal her itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini or whatever Hulk Hogan called it. But that was different. He's just showing a bikini. We're implying nudity here. How do you reconcile that on a program that 2 weeks ago had a Karate Fighters Championship tournament match?
We're inconsistent and taking it a little too far. It was a reach out, stretch, if you will. So it just didn't seem like it resonated with enough people. The young men that got to see them, those boobs, liked it, apparently, seemingly. But other than that, it's just didn't work. Didn't work. We're trying too hard to be sensationalistic. And the best sensationalistic content is usually what is organically developed and has some common sense involved in it. Some of the things we did with Goldust had made no sense.
What did you think of Shotgun Saturday Night as a concept, running this show live from a New York nightclub?
It was a pain in the ass because of production values. Production was iffy, just more work. It added another day of television. And so it wasn't a real popular show within the walls of WWE, as one might assume.
Well, I'll tell you what, you and I are super into, and that's the idea that spring is here. So it's out with the old and in with the new, but don't splurge on anything new without getting cash back in return when you use Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, maybe that flight you've been eyeing, or a fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that really don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or even gift cards. Join the over 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 different brands and retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 for just trying Ibotta by using the code GRILLINGJR when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use our code GRILLINGJR. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or Apple App Store, and be sure to use the promo code GRILLINGJR. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or Apple App Store, and the promo code is GRILLINGJR. You'll get $5 just for trying it. What have you got to lose, folks? Check it out. It's Ibotta on the App Store. So listen, let's talk about the Royal Rumble, man. It's going to go down. It's one of my favorite Royal Rumbles. It's in San Antonio, January 19th, 1997. We did a full episode on this in the archives at grillingjr.com. On the show, we see Hunter Hearst Helmsley pin Goldust in 16 minutes and 50 seconds to retain the Intercontinental title. Mr. Hughes is going to be the guy who's in Hunter Hearst Helmsley's corner here. He'll distract the referee. Helmsley's going to kiss Marlena. It's a fun match for what it is. Ultimately, Triple H gets the win. He hits the pedigree for the win. And Meltzer would say Helmsley has potential, but at this point, he's being pushed only on potential and politics, and because he's got a good head of hair. I don't know how fair that is. What do you think of that comment from Meltzer?
Wise ass.
Yeah.
Well, it's just him trying to be cynical and funny, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. But I thought Triple H showed great promise early on as a future uh, significant and top level heel. I never doubted it whatsoever. He had a feel for it. He understood the principles of being a heel, and he did a good job with it without question, as his track record, his Hall of Fame career would indicate. So I've always been in his corner in that respect. He's just a really good talent, and for me, as the head of talent relations, I'm big on reliability. And Triple H wrestled when he was hurt, whether the creative was good, and it wasn't all good. He did a great job.
Let's talk about what's next for Goldust. He's in the Royal Rumble match. He comes in at 14. He's going to eliminate Helmsley and then get thrown out himself by Owen Hart. And we should mention that we're right around the corner from In Your House Final Four in Chattanooga. But before we do that, the February 10th Observer had a little note that said Dennis Rodman's people told WCW that he had a $500,000 offer to work WrestleMania and be in Goldust's corner, apparently to set the two up as a tag team for SummerSlam. And since he'd previously worked for WCW, he gave them the opportunity to match the offer. And the belief is that WCW would have, but Rodman's NBA probation may not allow him to be a part of Pro Wrestling Angles. We know he winds up showing up at Uncensored 1997 in March for WCW, so that winds up happening. But do you remember this rumor and innuendo about an initial offer from the WWF?
Yeah. It's just counter programming. He fit the bill. He was a little loony, crazy, the character of Dennis Rodman. So yeah, I heard. Obviously, I heard. It was a long shot, and the one thing you want to make sure is that 500K offer doesn't just spread like wildfire, because then you got other guys. Well, Rodman's not even going to take any bumps, and he's getting $500,000. What do I get? And that's a logical question. And you're not going to get 500K. I can tell you that. So it was, but Dennis would have fit in that presentation without question. Just wasn't meant to be.
Let's talk a little bit about In Your House Final Four. It's Chattanooga, February 16th. We've got 6,400 fans there. And the match is Farouk, Crush, and Savio Vega taking on Flash Funk, Goldust, and Bart Gunn. Now, that's not really what's notable about this for Goldust. It's that during the Hunter Hearst Helmsley match, Goldust comes out. And as he's distracting Helmsley, Maivia comes up from behind with a back suplex and a bridge for the pin. After the match, it appeared that Helmsley and Goldust were going to go at it when all of a sudden this Amazon lady attacks Marlena and just shook the shit out of her. She starts choking her, but then ragdolls her. This is the debut of Chyna. Man, this is real wrestling history. Chyna's going to go on to become one of the top stars in the entire company. And here she is debuting with part of the Goldust act. That's a cool little feather in the cap for Goldust and Marlena.
Yeah, I got the good rub. So it meant that Vince still had confidence in Goldust. The rubs were passed around, and it just showed also that Vince had not given up on the Goldust character.
We follow up with it on Monday Night Raw. Kevin Kelly's doing an in-ring interview with Goldust and Marlena, and Goldust is saying that this Helmsley feud is now personal. And Marlena is going to say that Goldust is more of a man than Helmsley could ever be. We get some physicality, some more Chyna here. It's pretty crazy to think that this is really one of the key ways that we debut Chyna. The Slammy Awards went down on March 21st. It's Goldust and Marlena who are going to win the Slammy for Best Couple. And the next day, of course, it's WrestleMania. WrestleMania 13 at the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago. There's over 18,000 fans there at the now Allstate Arena. It's a huge gate, $837,000. Goldust and Helmsley go about 14 and a half minutes. Helmsley retains. It feels like we're just sort of going through the motions at this point on some level. We're no longer working main events, but we're still figured in with the Intercontinental title. Do you think his payoffs are suffering, or because business is on an uptick, is he still making roughly the same, if you had to guess?
I'd say he's making roughly the same, maybe a little less, but not much. Not enough, I don't think, to make a big difference. That's just me trying to go back to my recall because I made those payoffs. I know what those guys made. And he never got screwed on his payoffs, but he wouldn't know that. He thought remember the number that he got for working with Piper, and I think he and Terry basically thought that all the payoffs would be in that range, but it didn't work that way. You got too many elements to factor in, and uh, the gate and or were you on the card and et cetera, et cetera. So uh, I think that he, every day Dustin would be worried about what was going on, and I think that babyface thing was a sign to him that maybe everything's not all good in creative land.
Let's talk about creative here for a minute, because there is a decision that's made here that we're going to try to evolve this Goldust character to the point that on April 21st, during the Hunter Hearst Helmsley Undertaker match, we see Goldust and Marlena at ringside, but not in their wrestling gimmicks. You see Marlena smoking a cigar, but you're actually going to refer to them on commentary as Dustin and Terry. What'd you think of this to show them out of character? No paint, no costuming, just real clothes. And if you weren't sure, well, yeah, that's still her. She's smoking a cigar. Maybe that's the only connective tissue. But it does feel like we're blurring the lines a little bit here, more than we normally have in the WWF. What'd you think of this decision?
I liked it. I liked it. It just showed a different side of it. Expanded their character. It enlarged their TV persona, and it was reality based, and it certainly was, and it worked.
Of course, this is all leading to a big sit down interview with you, with both of those folks. And we actually see footage of them with showing baby pictures of him with his dad, Dusty Rhodes. And he's explaining that he did this Goldust persona to get out of his father's shadow. He's going to talk about working with Razor Ramon, who they're calling Scott Hall, and saying he didn't want to work with him. And man, that hurt his feelings. What'd you think of this concept of we're going to do some quote unquote shoot interviews of our own here on WWE programming?
I liked them, Connie. They were good, entertaining television. And you go all the way back to the interview I did with Mick Foley, the Mankind interview. It had proved to be effective if presented correctly, and we all did our job of communicating this storyline. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing them. I think they helped the whole deal. I remember, think about the one I did with Rock and Steve. That was a big sales tool for WrestleMania. And so I was for those situations. They allowed us to focus on the issue without having to shoot an angle and have a match, and I think that's good planning.
We should mention that they're using their real life daughter, Dakota, as a way to establish Goldust as a face. She's only 3 years old here. She's dressed like a little mini Marlena. They're trying to get her to say Goldust, but she's not really doing it. When they give her the mic, she runs away with it. And you say on commentary something like, oh, just like her grandfather, hogging the mic. So it's fun stuff. What do you think of involving children in this story? Or as a rule, do you like the use of kids in wrestling, or
Not normally, no. Not normally, no. You don't work with kids or animals, as the old expression goes, the saying goes. Uh, but it made it real. It made it took us a step closer to where we wanted people to perceive Goldust. He's a dad. He's not a gay man He's the dad. Not that gay men can't be dads, obviously. But I thought that incorporating Dakota was in small doses was good because it added realism to the storyline.
Well, we lean into this Attitude Era maybe a too much. There's a pretty regrettable promo that Jerry Lawler cuts on Dustin here as Jerry the King Lawler. Now, of course, it's not the real Jerry Lawler. This is a character, but boy, he's using some really strong language that we're not even going to repeat here. But it's not nice, and well, it's just hate speech on some level. But that's what we were going for. We're trying to court attention at all costs. Do you remember thinking at the time, this is a mistake?
A little heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little heavy. Probably not the best judgment in hindsight. Of course, a lot of things are more clear in hindsight, as we all know. But I thought King took advantage of his TV time, and it was pretty strong, and surprised me it's so strong.
Yeah, listen, I wouldn't advocate that promo now, but you know, some of the language that's used back then, you would hear in movies and things like that. So I'm sure that they said, hey, well, they can get away with this on television, or they can get away with this in a movie. We can get away with this. And certainly they did, but I don't know if it was the best thing, especially when we're blurring the lines. And as we said, involving children, but hey, that's what we did. Lawler actually has this match and he wins in 5 minutes and 21 seconds in this King of the Ring qualifying match with Goldust. The crowd is booing Goldust out of the building. Lawler's going to get a big pop doing the pile driver. It's pretty crazy to think that, you know, after all we've done to make him a babyface, the fans just don't care.
That's the sad part about it.
Yes.
That's the telltale thing that, well, maybe we were wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't make him a babyface. You know, a lot of maybes, a lot of ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? Again, when you're booking Goldust, you're booking a different guy than you've ever booked previously. His TV persona. Nobody had ever been like him. And in one way, that's great. But in another way, it's a lot of that stuff's very iffy. How are people going to respond to this? And you won't know until you do it.
We got to talk about In Your House Canadian Stampede. It's July 6th, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Goldust finds himself in his first and only pay-per-view main event in his entire WWF run. And that's crazy when you think, hey man, he did a stadium show in the main event spot for the world title with 21,000 fans there. And he did all these house show loops working with Shawn on top for the title. But if he's only going to be in one main event, boy, this should be the one. It's Brett, Owen, Davey, Jim Neidhart, and Brian Pillman taking on Austin, the LOD, Ken Shamrock, and Goldust. The crowd is so hot. The camera is shaking. The hard camera is shaking. One of the craziest pay-per-view main events of all time. It goes 24 minutes and 31 seconds. Of course, the Canadians get the win. I wish Goldust would have had more main events, but boy, if you're only going to have one, that's a pretty damn good one to have it in.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love that show. I love Patterson, Bruce, myself. I can't remember who else. Spent much of the afternoon on the fairgrounds eating, turkey legs and corn dogs and things like that. So, but I had a lot of fun at that event. It was just if you've never been the Stampede and the fair, it was pretty cool. And hell, being from Oklahoma, I never experienced anything like the Calgary Stampede. It was a historic, world famous event. So I had a lot of fun that day. I remember a lot of the moments in it. I remember Patterson eating a giant turkey leg, which is kind of funny, but that's a story for another time.
Let's talk about what's next after Canadian Stampede. July 7th on Monday Night Raw, Goldust once again finds himself in the main event. This time he's pinned clean by Bret Hart, but it's the idea that Pillman comes out and attacks Goldust and tries to stuff a dress from a mannequin down his throat. Marlena's going to make the save, choking out Pillman. And it's announced pretty quickly, Goldust and Pillman are going to be working at SummerSlam. And if Goldust wins, Pillman has to wear a dress. And Dustin would say this is when life began to imitate art and the walls started closing in a little, both inside and outside of the ring. He says, I worked this angle with Brian Pillman where he kidnapped Terry. Brian had dated her way back before we were married, which of course always made me insecure. I didn't have a problem with him. We were friendly and I did my best to sort of go with the flow, but I was very uncomfortable. What can you tell us about this? Like when the real life story predates the television story and there's just emotions and feelings involved. That's not normal in wrestling, but it does happen. What do you think?
Goddamn, Conrad, none of this is normal.
Yeah.
Think about it. You got a guy who's androgynous or he's not. He's a father or he's not. He's gay or he's not. Come on. None of this shit was normal. It was all, it's almost experimental, quite honestly. So, yeah, and Dustin pulled it off as best he could. If you consider his basic paranoia that he had, that he carried with him every day, he was very challenged in how this whole thing went down.
SummerSlam 97 goes down August 3rd. It's the first pay-per-view back in New Jersey in a while. 20,213 fans paying $523,000 at the gate. Another $200K in merch. Goldust is going to pin Brian Pillman in 7 minutes and 15 seconds. They don't have the best chemistry in the ring, but Goldust gets the win. That means Brian Pillman has to wear a dress, which he'll do the next night on Monday Night Raw. And he has to keep wearing the dress until he wins a match. Do you think that Brian had any problem with this creative?
Hell no. The more outrageous and controversial, the better for Brian. He lived for that stuff.
We see a match on August 18th. Pillman is wrestling Jesse James. Goldust interferes, causes a DQ, and that means Pillman has to keep wearing the dress. So I like that creative. And after the match, Pillman challenges Goldust to a match on the next pay-per-view, where if he loses, he leaves the WWF forever. But if he wins, he gets Marlena for 30 days. Goldust refuses, and then Pillman says that their daughter, Dakota, is actually his daughter.
Oh, God.
And Goldust freaks out.
You knew it was coming, right? You knew it was coming, for God's sakes. Jesus criminy.
Well, I know what's coming for you later today, and that's our friends at BlueChew. This episode and JR's Wiener are brought to you by BlueChew. BlueChew's a unique online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is simple. You'll sign up at BlueChew.com. You'll consult with one of their licensed medical providers. And once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. But there won't be anything discreet about your package. BlueChew wants to help you have better sex. So discover your options at BlueChew.com. Let's chew it and do it, boys. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try BlueChew free when you use our promo code JR at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is JR and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring today's podcast.
That might be the best deal we've advertised all day.
Yeah.
$5, the shipping, the whole package. Find out if it really works for you, and it will. I guarantee it will. And I speak from what I have experienced. It will work. And $5 shipping. What the hell you got to lose? What are you waiting on? What are you waiting on? Let's go.
Do it right now. BlueChew.com. Be sure to use our promo code JR. You'll be glad you did.
Yep.
Let's talk about In Your House Ground Zero. It's September 7th, 1997. We're in Louisville, Kentucky. $82,000 at the gate. Almost 5,000 fans there. We're calling it an indecent proposal match, and Brian Pillman wins. They actually make mention in the buildup for this of the previous relationship. And Pillman says, I dumped her, and then she went to Dustin on the rebound. I could see how Dustin didn't like all this. Marlena's going to hit Pillman with the purse, and that has a brick in it. Pillman gets the purse from her, hits Goldust with it instead, and scores the pin. And now Pillman drags Marlena off with him, throws her into his car, and drives off. Goldust is giving chase. The next night, we're doing Raw in Cincinnati, and Dude Love is supposed to wrestle Brian Pillman for the Intercontinental Tournament. But Pillman's not there, and instead sends in a video for Goldust to watch, acting as if he spent the night in Marlena in a motel. This is the Pillman Triple X Files. Of course, X Files was a big show about aliens and bullshit like that on Fox at the time. So we leaned into that with the name Pillman Triple X Files. Later in the show, Goldust would wrestle Owen in the tournament, but Goldust is DQ'd after about 2 minutes, hitting some low blows. And after the match, we see another Triple X Files video. And Meltzer would write, expect the Pillman Marlena angle to go similar to the Dusty Rhodes baby doll deal. Marlena will act as if she hates it, but after the 30 days, it's planned she'll turn on Goldust again, and it'll come out the acceptance of the challenge and bricking the purse was all part of her plan. Mark Mero has been talked with, and it's been teased on TV to do a split with he and Sable, but I think that one should be cooled down because it would be too similar, and also because Mero seems to legitimately have more of a problem doing the split with his wife on television than the Runnels family do, since Dustin grew up around the wrestling industry. Was that the original plan? We know we're not going to get a payoff, and we're going to talk about why, but do you think Marlena was ultimately going to side with Brian Pillman in the end and turn on Goldust?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. It seemed like that was logical at that point in time.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think so, Connie.
On the September 22nd episode of Raw from Madison Square Garden, that's the show where famously we would see Austin give the stunner to Vince McMahon, Cactus Jack make his WWF debut, and before the show, Vince tell Brett, I can't afford your contract. See if you can get that WCW offer.
Busy day at the office, huh?
What a loaded show. On that same show, they announced that Goldust and Marlena are going to renew their wedding vows on Raw come October 6th. Now, that wound up being the day after Brian Pillman died, so it never actually happened. But on October 4th in St. Paul, Goldust is going to wrestle Brian Pillman at a house show. And that winds up being Brian Pillman's very last match. He would pass away later that night or early the following morning. And Dustin would say the night before the payoff, we had a live event in Bloomington. We had a pretty good angle going, but Brian was just too messed up to work. I don't know what he was taking, but he could barely walk. I remember thinking, I'm going to have to protect him out there, and at the same time, I've got to protect myself. We got through the match as best we could. The crowd responded really well, and as far as anyone knew, everything was fine. Afterwards, I walked in the locker room, and Brian was sitting in the corner looking like his dog had been shot. I kept asking if he was okay, and finally he said, I don't know, man, I'm just really depressed. The next morning, we flew to St. Louis for the pay-per-view, and the routine is pretty straightforward. We land, we get something to eat, and we head to the arena. It was an early call because of the pay-per-view, so we probably were scheduled to be at the arena at least 5 hours before the match. As the day went on, I realized Brian wasn't at the arena. Finally, I told somebody to call the hotel and check on him. He had looked really bad the night before, and I didn't have a good feeling when he wasn't where he was supposed to be, especially for such a big match. Ultimately, they found Brian dead in his hotel room. Golly, this is one of the more tragic things that happened on your watch in WWE, is it not?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Of course. I was close to Brian. I signed Brian. I've been an ally of Brian's since the early days of Flying Brian, the high flyer in WCW. So yeah, it was heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. I love Brian. I think about Brian almost every day.
Man, it's just hard.
It's a lot to throw on your shoulders because you got, not only do you have that issue, but that issue spawns other issues. Talent asking questions. What really happened, JR? Come on, you can tell me. That type thing. And just couldn't get away from that stuff. Just couldn't get away from it.
They do a Monday Night Raw on October 27th. It was actually taped on the 21st, and they announced that the following week on November 3rd, Marlena's going to do a live interview to talk about her 30 days with Brian Pillman. This is after he's passed away for real. That's in poor taste, comes off exploitative. And Dustin said, Terry and I did an infamous interview with Jim Ross at the corporate headquarters in Stamford. I was really nervous about the interview. My addiction was making me paranoid. I was drinking more and things at home were deteriorating quickly. I was never physically violent, but I'd become an angry person and verbally abusive to Terry. I thought my anger was justified, but of course it wasn't. None of it was. The drugs and alcohol triggered every one of my insecurities and magnified every slight, whether real or imagined. In the dressing room prior to the interview, I drank several shots of Crown Royal to calm my nerves. I was ready to unload and I wanted what came out to be real. We talked about my dad and how he was never there when I was younger or later when I was having problems in my life. I knew what they wanted to go right up to the line, and I wanted to be as powerful as possible. I wasn't drunk, but I was comfortable enough to say anything. The atmosphere was intense because of everything going on in my personal life, particularly with Terry. What can you tell us about this interview? What do you remember from your perspective? Could you tell that he had been drinking? Was it a big deal or no?
Hell no, I didn't know he was drinking. Of course not. I didn't know. If I'd known, then we would have called a timeout, started drinking coffee or something. No, I didn't have any idea. I wouldn't have condoned that. And neither would Vince or anybody else in a place of administration. Terry went through hell. Terry really went through hell, and she was again an old school person, so she was getting a break, and she was making more money than she was accustomed to making, because she was figured into a major storyline. So she just, but she went through hell, man. She went through hell with, and you can't be a marriage counselor. That's the one thing I learned. You want to solve everybody's problems, but that's a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. Plus, I'm not qualified to be a marriage counselor or Dr. Phil or somebody. It ain't me. I'm not trained to do that. And, but I felt bad for her. You know, I'd known her since she was Alexandria York of the York Foundation. So, I felt bad for her. Those drugs and alcohol changed the guy's personality. If you knew, if you saw Dustin today in AEW, which he's a valuable asset, you wouldn't even believe that how he used to be, because he's come such a long way that it's very admirable. It shows you that if you really want to get straight and get clean, live a better life, if you want to badly enough, you can. And Dustin has made that decision and is living a healthy lifestyle. How in the hell do you think he still wrestles as good as he does in today? And I said before, you know, his match with Cody a few years back was the best AEW match that I called, in my opinion. I might have a different opinion tomorrow. I don't think I will, but I might have. I just thought Dustin still got it, and thank God he's clean and sober. He's got a wrestling school, and I encourage anybody that is wanting to learn how to be a pro wrestler to check it out. Why not? He knows how to work. He knows how to be a heel. He knows how to be a babyface. He knows about traditions. Just I'm just so proud of Dustin right now and where he is in his life. It's heartwarming.
We got to talk about this idea he had. Dustin says around this time, I wanted to wrestle my father on television. Vince never commented one way or another. I didn't actually want to beat my dad, but I thought it would bring closure to our issues. I'm sure Vince thought I'd do something stupid if he gave me the opportunity. It didn't matter though, because my dad wasn't going to have any part of it. Even after we reconciled, I tried to appeal to my dad's business sense. He wouldn't even consider wrestling me. I always thought Goldust wrestling Dusty Rhodes would have been huge. What do you think of that creative?
Don't like it. Wouldn't have done it. Glad we didn't do it. Pushing the envelope too much. We're trying too hard, in my opinion. We're trying too hard, in my opinion. And I'm glad they didn't do it.
Survivor Series 97. Yep, that one. Montreal Screwjob went down November 9th, and Goldust, in the course of his match here, breaks his hand in 3 places. He's going to wind up being counted out, and that furthers his heel turn. He's on Team USA, which is Goldust, Vader, Mark Miro, and Steve Blackman. On November 17th, it's Goldust versus Vader. They go to a no contest, and Goldust is going to show up wearing pantyhose with like checkerboard like face paint. And you would say on commentary, it looks like he dressed in Elton John's closet. And he would say he's too hurt to wrestle, but then he hits Vader in the head with a hammer. What do you think about this new version of Goldust, the evolution of this character?
Well, all characters have to evolve. There's no doubt about that. Whether I like the exact direction, step by step that it was taking is irrelevant. But evolving is very, very important. You can't allow your character to get stale. And I think the Vince's thoughts were at that time, if we don't do something, this character is going to get stale. And all the money that we have invested in getting him over on this creative journey would be for naught.
Let's talk about what's next here. After we did this crazy face paint, we've got MSG as a house show, and Goldust is going to do an interview saying he likes to wear women's panties and that all the little boys should check out their mommy's underwear drawer. I don't know if that's a good idea.
It's not a good idea. It's stupid. God damn it, Conrad. It's not a good idea. It's stupid. Why we allowed that to be said and happen when we're trying to go the other direction is a total inconsistency. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
Did you express that to Vince?
Hell yeah. But he liked the controversy. He loved the controversy. He loved the, having these issues and things of that nature. Just, it was just, well, are we going to do this or not? Are we going to, what's this character going to be? He keeps changing. He's going to be a nice guy, or he's going to be a daddy, or, whatever. It just didn't work for me. It's just too much inconsistencies and distasteful at times.
Let's talk a little bit about what's next. We see Goldust come out on November 24th, 1997 on Monday Night Raw in a wheelchair. He's going to announce that he's now a quadriplegic, and he has a nurse with him called Nurse Goodbody. He's got FU painted on his face here. Vader's going to come out and say he doesn't believe it, and he attacks Goldust, and the nurse, who turns out to be Luna Vachon, throws alcohol in his eyes. And Goldust has said of a meeting that he had with Vince at the time, quote, "I wanted to do something with this character. I had a person in mind to help Goldust become a crazy, bizarre bondage type character. I had a picture of being led around on a dog leash with a collar and a ball in my mouth, and Luna Vachon was perfect for the role. Vince gave the go ahead, and it turned out to be awesome. Goldust was supposed to wrestle Vader at the DX pay-per-view in December, but he had surgery and 3 pins were put into his hand. So at the pay-per-view, Goldust and Luna do an interview where Goldust is actually reading from the Dr. Seuss book, Green Eggs and Ham. And he's going to do it in a stereotypical voice, we should say. This is just, we're a long way from the Cowboys' idea of pro wrestling here.
Yeah, no shit. We really are. We'd go down the road. We're going to change. We're going to make this a little bit more palatable. And then we're not. Then we are. And then we're not. I couldn't I needed a program with everybody's jersey number. I didn't know. It's hard to say what we're doing because I don't think we knew for sure what we were doing.
It's just a mess. I mean, I don't know another way to say it. On the December 1st episode of Raw, Goldust is going to be out here with Luna. He's now got pink hair and he's wearing a jock strap on the outside of his clothes. He's got a spiked bra on the outside of his clothes. He's clearly going for some sort of a bondage gimmick with the ball and the leash, like you see. TSN refused to air the segment. So this doesn't actually make air in Canada. Were you a part of any of those USA won't let us do that or TSN won't let us do this type conversations?
Of course, absolutely. And it was hard to make an argument that, well, they got a point. They did have a point. And for their air, they just weren't comfortable with it. And we can't expect everybody to be totally comfortable with everything that we do of that ilk. It was just, we're on a slippery slope on a rough and rugged road.
December 22nd on Raw, Goldust and Luna are going to come out and say, "'Twas the night before Christmas." That's what they read as that whole deal. Santa Claus comes out, of course, attacks Goldust, and it winds up being Vader. And around this time, we start to call Goldust the artist formerly known as Goldust. And this is, of course, borrowed from the singer Prince, who had changed his name as the artist formerly known as Prince. And at the beginning of the December 29th Raw, Goldust shows up dressed like a New Year's baby. He's got a diaper and a large bottle. He's doing this exaggerated voice. Steve Austin comes out and they drop an outhouse from the ceiling. Austin puts Goldust in it twice. He turns it over the second time. Meltzer says that the way to get out of doing a match between the two had been hyped on television all weekend. So Crapper 316, this porta potty. I mean, goodness gracious. Is this the definition of crash TV, perhaps?
I think so. I don't know, or some kind of TV, something not too flattering. But I guess it all tied together to some extent. But farther down the road we went, the crazier it got, and hard to figure out. I guess in a way that's a good thing because people couldn't figure out the next move, but it was disjointed at very best, very, very disjointed.
Well, it's the Vince Russo experiment. I mean, this crash TV, that's what he's really known for. And I'm sure he had fun painting outside of the lines with Dustin here. And we actually recently sat down with Vince Russo because we were talking a little bit about who killed WCW with Eric Bischoff, and Russo came up. And since he was a subject of one of those episodes, I thought, why not let some of our supporters over at adfreeshows.com pick his brain? And we did that last week. And I've got a clip here of some of our conversation with Vince Russo from adfreeshows.com.
So Vince McMahon rolled the dice and took a gamble with me, and it worked out. Unfortunately, my peers, they were not very happy with that. And that in a nutshell, Conrad, to me, that's been the problem from day one. I was not born into this business. I was not bred in this business. I was a regular wrestling fan who got my foot in and worked my way up. And that just did not sit well with a lot of people. You know about the paying the dues and the car rides and you know about all that stuff, Conrad. So everybody looked at me like, who did this guy ever beat? I mean, right. That's what I was constantly up against.
Good interview.
Good interview indeed. You can catch the full conversation with Vince Russo and a whole lot more over at adfreeshows.com. We recently saw Violent J from the Insane Clown Posse make some headlines, and we actually had him on last week live as well. So be sure to check it out if you haven't already. There's something for everybody. We're talking more than 100,000 hours of bonus content. We just sat down with Lex Luger last week. We get with David Crockett every week to look through his brother's books, the Red Books from Booking Jim Crockett Promotions. We rotate Monday Mailbag between Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick. Blue Meanie is catching up with you every Saturday morning. Kevin Sullivan is also with us Tuesdays with the Taskmaster, plus every live Starcast we've ever done, all the interactive Q&As with all of our hosts, plus more than 100,000 hours of bonus content. It's all available now at adfreeshows.com. So let's talk about 1998. January 5th, we see Goldust come out dressed like a black pimp. Yeah, he's going to have a match against Flash Funk. And Meltzer would say that Funk was allowed to show his stuff, and it was some of the best wrestling on the entire show. Man, these crazy over-the-top skits, is this just a collaboration, do you think, between Russo and Dustin?
Yeah, to some degree, but Vince has got to be included in that because he's got to prove it.
Right.
So if Vince didn't like it, it wouldn't have happened. Vince did like it, and it happened. And we just tried to connect the dots as best we could in this uncharted waters.
We got the Royal Rumble in 1998 in San Jose. That was January 18th. A huge crowd, over 18,000 folks are there. And Meltzer would say that Vader pinned the artist formerly known as Goldust in 7 minutes and 47 seconds. Both are working hard, but Maybe the match was off a little bit. Vader's going to climb the ropes with Luna on his back. He does the Vader bomb with Luna on his back, and that gets the pin. Goldust is also in the Rumble match. He comes in 17th. He's eliminated, or he eliminates Mankind, and then he himself gets thrown out by chains. We see a rematch with Vader and Goldust on January 26th. And then later on in the show, we see Owen versus Triple H, and it's Owen versus Goldust dressed up as Triple H with a blonde wig and a large fake nose. Luna is going to be dressed up as Chyna, and the match ends when Owen wins using the sharpshooter. But DX is going to get on the video wall and make fun of him for wasting his time beating a copy. And Slaughter tells DX the joke's on them. And since Triple H was supposed to be in the match and he wasn't, Owen is the new European champion. Listen, whether we think that ruins the credibility of the title, respectfully, it's the European title. That's good creative. That's a nice story. What'd you think?
A fair story.
Yeah.
Fair story. I don't like that the way the succession rate and how it's done is, I'm a little particular there, but I was underwhelmed by it. Was it bad? Probably not bad. But was it as good as it could have been? No, not at all.
It's interesting. 1998 is going to continue to evolve, and of course, it's going to be a really big year for Goldust. We're going to go ahead and pause our conversation about Goldust for now because this fella has had a career that has spanned decades. Yeah. And I don't think that he gets
Hall of Famer, man. He's a Hall of Famer.
No doubt.
Without a doubt. I wonder if he'll ever be enshrined in the WWE Hall of Fame.
He's got to be.
He deserves it, but because of his relationship with Tony Khan and AEW, which is well deserved, it may never happen. And that's unfortunate.
It's going to happen eventually. It's got to happen eventually. I think everybody knows that Dustin belongs in every Hall of Fame. And I'm glad we got to give him some flowers because I found him and his family to just be delightful. I think a lot of his wife and his daughter and just him as a human being. My gosh, the way he continues to motivate people and inspire people, because we've only scratched the surface maybe on some of his demons and trials and tribulations. But the idea that, he came out the other side, a real success story, and is still wrestling at a high level right now today in 2024 and passing it on. I mean, he's got that training school now, and I just think a lot of him and his story, and I'm glad we got to spend some time talking about him today.
Yeah, me too. He's a survivor in the true sense of the word. And I love that kid. I've known him since he was a high school kid. I remember getting introduced to him the first time by Dusty. I remember Dusty was talking about him being a defensive tackle for the high school football team there in Charlotte, one of the teams. And, I don't know. I just, I feel close to him. I feel a kinship to him still to this day. And it's growing because I'm so proud of the fact that he's not dependent on drugs and alcohol. Saved his life. There's no way that Dustin would have been alive today if he had not made those changes.
Well, we're glad he made those changes and he's still with us. Be sure to catch him on AEW every Wednesday night and, of course, every Saturday night and occasionally on Friday as well. He's a big part of what they're doing in AEW, and we'll hope you'll continue to support Dustin Rhodes moving forward. Next week, we're going to be talking about King of the Ring 1999. We're going to be talking about the higher power, Steve Austin becoming CEO, the infamous ladder match between Steve and the McMahons, the Undertaker and The Rock and the WWF title. How about Billy Gunn starting to get the mega push? The Hardys are going to face off with Edge and Christian in the first of many encounters on pay-per-view. And of course, we'll be discussing the fallout of Owen's death and the impact on the company and just the entire industry. That's all coming up next week as we talk about King of the Ring 1999. But before we get there, this weekend, Forbidden Door, AEW on pay-per-view. Hear JR do what he does best. The voice of professional wrestling will be behind the microphone, and you don't want to miss it. Live on pay-per-view. Tickets are still on sale. A handful of tickets remain at AEWTIX.com. Jim, you looking forward to calling some AEW action this weekend? Should be a
hell yeah, man. I'm excited about it. I'm pumped and hope fans will tune in. You won't be disappointed. Great array of talent, international scope and notoriety. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to get started.
Join us this weekend. And if you haven't already, make plans to join JR next weekend in Philadelphia on July the 6th. He's going to be at 2300 Arena. That's right, at the corner of Swanson and Rittner in South Philadelphia. It's Battleground Championship Wrestling. They're bringing you the barbecue bash, meet and greet. You don't want to miss good old JR. July the 6th. That's next weekend in Philadelphia. And if you're actually going to make that trip, man, you need some reading material. We got autographed books. Business is about to pick up. The brand new book from Jim Ross, available autographed at jrsbbq.com. And since you're there putting that in your cart anyway, throw some damn all-purpose seasoning in there too, would you? And Jim, I appreciate all the time today, man. I hope you have a safe trip to New York and y'all have a hell of a pay-per-view. I'll be watching live.
It should be fun, Conrad. I always appreciate you, and thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm very grateful. Put it that way. Very grateful.
We are too, and we'll see you guys next week right here on Grilling JR with the voice of professional wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Thanks, everybody.
Your house is probably worth more than ever right now, but if you could change one thing about your house, what would it be? Would you put in a new kitchen? Maybe some new hardwood floors? You can do all of that with no money out of pocket at SaveWithConrad.com. Use your equity to make your house worth even more. You might even be able to get a lower payment too. A better house with a lower payment without moving? Sign me up for that. NMLS number 32416, equal housing lender, SaveWithConrad.com.